Well, thank you all so much for joining us for Be the CEO of Your Career, clarity driven framework to sustain your career. Are you ready to get clear on what you really want and determine what's next in your career? Your career isn't about following someone else's map, it's about trusting your own compass and being the CEO of your career. C stands for curiosity, E stands for be engaged, and O stands for take ownership. Learn how to engage this CEO framework, a succession of 5 practices designed to help you navigate a path to your career with confidence, or to direct your career with confidence and purpose. And this is all led by the wonderful Tammy Gooler Loeb, MBA, CPCC, a career and leadership strategy coach, speaker, author, and podcast host. Her award winning book, Work from the Inside Out: Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career That Fulfills You, outlines the typical barriers that keep people professionally stuck and how to move past them. As the host of the Working from the Inside Out podcast, Tammy has interviewed nearly 300 guests who have made thoughtful career transitions, sharing their origin stories, strategies, and insights with a global audience. I again want to thank the Friends of the Library for sponsoring. And just a reminder, the program is being recorded and all registrants will receive the recording via email this afternoon. So all 89 of us who are watching live and the many more that will watch the recording, let's give a big virtual round of applause to Tammy for joining us this morning. And Tammy, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
All right. Well, Robert, thank you so much. And thanks to the Tewksbury Public Library for hosting this. So good morning, everyone, and apologies for the late start, but let's move forward. So what does it mean to be the CEO of your career? It means to get curious, be engaged, and take ownership. Several years ago, I was noticing as a career coach and leadership coach that there was a pretty significant increase in uncertainty and instability out there in the workplace marketplace. And I realized that increasingly people could no longer really rely on their employers for that deeper sense of security in terms of their careers and their work life. And I don't mean to say that to sound gloom and doom or anything like that. I think there are a lot of employers out there who really are trying to provide a positive and productive work environment for their employees. And it's no secret, it's really tough out there in a lot of different ways. So it became increasingly clear to me, though, that a lot of people were engaging with the employment marketplace still with that mindset, though, of that all I need is to find a full-time job with benefits and I will be okay. And I thought, that doesn't really work anymore. You really need to take a much more curious approach. You need to be more widely engaged with your networks and not just to go around networking, because I know a lot of people get anxious about networking. And you need to take a much deeper sense of ownership around your career and your work life in general and your future. So what does it mean? Let's get curious. So this is something that many of us are able to do, but we don't, especially if we're in a situation where we're finding ourselves feeling an urgency around our employment situation. It's hard to feel curious because you really need that next situation to help support you. So I'm not talking about a situation where you just relax and get curious about everything when, your bank account is emptying out. I'm not talking about not taking care of the practical matters of life. Always those things come first. But what I want to emphasize here is that along with things feeling urgent, try to the best of your ability. And if things aren't feeling quite that level of urgency with those practical matters, still remind yourself to get curious, to stay curious. Simply notice things around you. When I say simply notice, that means notice things that are around you. Sometimes those things are literally right in front of you. And people are too busy staying focused on the one thing they're trying to accomplish rather than noticing things that are right in front of them that they could get further curious about and learn from. And those things could lead them to another idea or another action or another resource, and it goes right by them. Also, I really encourage you to think about who you are, not just what you do. So, for those of us who live in the Boston area, and even if you live in other areas too, we have a preponderance of very highly qualified, probably overeducated people, very highly skilled. So, when employers make hiring decisions, they're often not making those decisions based on your skills because they've got a pool of candidates in front of them who are highly skilled. And they're making decisions about who you are, how they can imagine what you would be like to work with, or what's been known as the likability factor. And I don't mean that in a personal way, like, who wants to be your best friend? It's more, will there be a good culture fit between you and the existing team? And so you want to think about who you are in the workplace or who you are in general. Some of the things that help you to start to think about that are, what are the kinds of things that people have thanked you for in the past? What do you like to work with? What kinds of feedback have you gotten from other people as you've worked with them over time? Or maybe not even people you've worked with, people who just know you in your life and have expressed appreciation. Oftentimes that starts to give you information. We're so close to ourselves. We don't always think about those things. And sometimes, we don't want to be full of ourselves in that way. And yet those qualities and are part of the value added. In fact, they're actually even more important sometimes. And then think about, what do you have control over? And think as broadly as you can about what you have control over in terms of the kinds of things that you might be looking at when you're looking at possible opportunities ahead of you. And I think people often think a little too narrowly about that, and they start to think about what's not possible rather than what is possible. It's very, very important. We're going to get into some of this a little bit more. And being engaged. So, being engaged means to really engage with everything around you. I'm not 24/7, but it's an awareness, just as the curiosity is an awareness. That E is very, very important. If you think about how you either acquired or became employed in a number of situations that you were in the past, there's a good likelihood that at least in one circumstance, and maybe all of them, you knew somebody who either recommended you or invited you into an employment situation. And you might have thought, oh, well, I've even heard people say to me, people who've been in the workforce for decades, who said, this is the first time I actually had to look for a job because I've been cheating all this time, because I always knew someone who invited me in or who recruited me or who stole me away. And I'm thinking, that's not cheating. You proved yourself. You became a trusted colleague, and somebody wanted to bring you into their organization because they wanted to work with you. You proved yourself, you earned it. That's networking. That's all under the category of networking. That's part of being engaged. You developed trusting relationships that earned you that invitation. So when I talk about being engaged, that's one avenue that a lot of people have experienced in one way or another. They've had some kind of relationship that led them to either information or a direct connection into an opportunity. The other thing, though, is that when you find yourself at that point where maybe some of your connections don't necessarily lead directly to that next opportunity, you need to do some information gathering. I find that people, when they reach that point where they're not sure where to go, or they're not sure exactly what they're looking for, or they've decided to, make some significant changes, they get anxious and then they start to feel like they're at a loss or they're not sure what to do. I hear that from a lot of people. Well, that's when you need to start doing some information gathering. That's that's that point you get to where you don't have all the information you need. So, one way to get information is to network. And what I mean by that isn't necessarily to go to a lot of large events and shake hands and exchange cards or, scanning everyone's QR codes, but connecting with people, people that you feel comfortable with, and talking with them, sometimes even talking with them about what they've been doing and just learning about their experience sometimes sparks ideas in your mind about something maybe that you forgot about for a while that really mattered to you. Learning about other people's experiences gives you an idea of things that maybe you haven't thought about in a while or sparks new ideas within you. Um, Dale Carnegie said, be interested, not interesting. And I think that's really good advice because the more that you learn from other people about their experiences, that will spark ideas within you, either things you've already known or new ideas. And that's part of what I call the inside out process. The other part of being engaged that's also very important is the follow up and the follow through. So if you've had a good conversation with somebody, make sure that you follow up with a very quick and timely thank you note. And then any kind of follow through or follow up on what you talked about. If there was an agreement to do something, make sure you do that. If you haven't spoken with somebody in a period of time, maybe send them a quick follow-up note to thank them again for their time and give them an update. But stay connected and always come from a place of gratitude. The other thing that a lot of people don't do when they've completed some type of a networking conversation is they don't offer to do something for the other person. They think that they're the person in need of help and they forget, guess what? You can help other people too. And there's a good likelihood that the person you're speaking with may come to you for help at some point. So I always suggest that when you're wrapping up any kind of conversation, whether it was a planned, scheduled networking conversation, or even, something that happens, ad hoc, but it turns into kind of a networking conversation, make sure that when you finish up that conversation, that, at the end you just say, hey, this was really helpful. Thanks. And, please let me know if there's anything I can do to be helpful to you. People don't expect that most of the time, and they will be eternally grateful and they'll remember you for having offered. There's a good likelihood they may not ask anything of you, and you don't have to worry about what they're asking of you. If they ask something of you, you do what you can to be helpful. And there's one other really key thing about being engaged around the information gathering piece, because I think people always think of networking and that kind of information gathering as always being a person to person or a one-on-one or a large group experience. But the other thing that a lot of people don't realize is that your library is a fantastic resource for getting information you may not have about organizations, about individuals in those organizations, about organizational culture, about the health of an organization, all kinds of things. Don't forget your librarians. They are amazing and they have ways and they're trained to look for information and to share with you ways to look for information that are not Google, that are not search engines that you're using now. They can show you the way in ways that those of us who don't have library science degrees can look for information. So access your library and develop a relationship with your reference librarian, or go to your local major city. They often have a business library, and talk to someone there. They'll do searches for you too sometimes. It depends on the library, but I know that the Boston Public Library has a very robust business library, and they're a fantastic resource. And sometimes they'll show you the databases that they have and things like that. Wonderful. I love libraries. And I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to you through a library. Um, so this is all part of taking ownership. Everything I'm talking about here is how you can expand how you feel about this process of getting to that next step. But it's not just about getting to that next step. It's about every time you find yourself at a turning point or just thinking about your future in one way or another. I actually recommend that people, even if you're happy where you are right now, always be open and curious, thinking about where you're going, feeling that sense of ownership. And given that we live in a pretty uncertain world, always have a plan A, B, and C. And what I mean by that is plan A is a situation in which you're really aligned. You love your work. It's really in alignment with who you are, your skills, your values, your interests. It's, as close to, what someone might call their dream job, or a job that really fits them well. And then plan B, it's kind of your backup job. It's a good fit. It works well for you. Maybe it's not the end all and be all, or some people prefer to have a plan B job because they have some other interests that job actually helps to support that they do elsewhere. And then sometimes you end up in a situation where you're in process, you're still trying to figure out what plan A or plan B looks like, but you just need some cash. So plan C is go out there, find something that you need to do just to bring in some cash. I see people sometimes who don't think about just going and finding a way to bring in cash. They either feel too proud, partially because they were working at a certain level in their career, and they have a sense of pride. They don't want to go and do something that feels beneath them. I understand that, but also don't, compromise your credit rating, don't compromise, the other parts of your life that you've worked so hard to build up. Keep yourself afloat. And more than anything, trust yourself that you're going to take care of yourself and your family and anyone else that you're, in relationship with, that you're trying to uh, take care of. So there's your CEO. Now, here's the framework. How do you work through this? So there are 5 elements to this framework. It's not really steps because there's a fluidity to it. You define your why. Why am I doing this? What's important to me? What's my anchor? What really keeps me connected to why I'm doing what I'm doing? And then you discover things. That's where the curiosity comes in. And then you synthesize and you focus some of your actions. You focus your ideas. And then you map and launch your career strategy. Now, that may change over time, but this is a framework that you can use and mold and shape no matter where you are in your career. You can use this to plan a retirement. It's a very flexible framework. And then all around that, at all times, you can reflect and refine each element. Let's take a walk through this. And as you can see, there's the compass, which helps you to set your direction. So defining your why. You want to get clear on your values, your vision, your goals, what matters most to you. This is your compass. This really is the grounding point that really helps you to lock in and feel solid about the decisions that you're making. And, at different points in time, it's going to change, but those things are the things that become unshakable for you. And that's what helps you stay grounded in the process. And then in your discovery, you're exploring all the possibilities. Keep connecting with other people. Don't stay inside yourself. Gather those insights, let them process through. That's where the reflection and refinement comes in as well. And then continue to expand your awareness beyond your usual environment. Allow yourself to be open to those things. Most of the time when people find themselves at a crossroads, even if you have decades of experience, there's always something to learn. There's always something you don't know. And learning is usually a motivator for a lot of people, both in the workplace and elsewhere. And I would say that your options are always broader than you think. I don't care how old you are and whatever data is out there that tells you you're in a group that's disadvantaged. You're one person looking for one situation. I'm not saying it's not challenging or that it can be difficult, but what I'm proposing here is both a mindset and a process that you can commit yourself to, along with being engaged with other people and not doing it alone, so that you can move through it in a successful way and really land where you want to be. And in the synthesis and the focus piece, you want to take all the things that you've been looking at and start to make sense of those discoveries and identifying key themes over time. This requires some patience too. These things don't happen overnight. A lot of people, especially if they're feeling an urgency about their situation, they think they're going to go from where they are today to the end point, and they forget that there's a process in the middle. I always liken it to the alphabet. They want to go from A to Z, and they forget there's B, C, D, E, F. There's things in the middle. Patience is a very, very important skill and tool to exercise throughout all of this. So if you are feeling an urgency around resources, finances, that's where I say go for your plan C if you need cash. And really use this process, eliminate the noise, tap back into those values, that why, and figure out what doesn't matter. I often will sit down with a stack of post-it notes and write down everything that's in my head on each post-it note, and then I organize it in front of me. It's not very digital, but it works. And then I start to see what's going on in front of me, and I get very clear about what the things are that I really want to be engaged with. That's one of my tools for eliminating the noise. And I have a rating system that I use for that. That really helps. And it does help you to focus on the paths that really resonate the most with you. And again, don't forget, there are people in your life who you can access to help you think these things through. So then you want to map and launch a strategy. And when I say launch, it could be an evolving, ongoing thing. It could be more iterative. It may not be that you're just starting at a certain point. You're probably already in process. But sometimes within that process, you may design a real step-by-step plan that gives you something really solid to hold on to so that you have that structure, that way of aligning your strengths with your ambitions, with your goals, with the things that really matter most to you. And that will give you that grounding, that solid feeling, that confidence, that sense of purpose. So whatever works for you in terms of having a plan, whether it's something written, something you do on the computer, maybe asking other people what they've used for these things. Find something that you think will work best for you. Some people like to use mind mapping. Other people like to use something more linear. like a timeline. So just know that whatever you put together, you can always change it. It's not, nothing is chiseled in stone here. And in your reflection and your refinement, you take a step back and you assess things. Maybe you even look at it side by side with another person, with another pair of eyes, and check in with yourself. Am I still in alignment? Am I still honoring the things that really were most important to me? Are they still important to me? Has anything changed in the process? What are my goals now? There's a big difference, of course. The kinds of things that, I had on my radar, in my 20s and 30s are not the same things that I have now, of course. So, that's why I say this is a framework you can use uh, in an iterative, ongoing way throughout your career. And also, as part of being the CEO of your career, think about what's in your control. Your thoughts, your actions, your decisions, right? A lot of what I'm sharing with you here, it is a framework, a methodology that you can really craft in your own way to suit you, but it's also a mindset. So thinking about what's in your control. What are the things you can influence? That's the part people sometimes get tripped up on. And then there are those things you really can't control, right? The economy, the weather, the traffic, right? Let those go. But I think too often people put too many things in the cannot control category that they really do have at least some influence on, but they don't think with more curiosity and openness about what's possible there. And that's why I do my podcast, actually, because some of the stories that I have gathered over the years demonstrate some of the real curious and creative ways that people have found their way into opportunities that you would never have guessed somebody would have done. I interviewed someone recently who um, as a child, had baked apple pies at age 12 and had sold them to restaurants. And then she interviewed for a job at a major management consulting firm after college. And she told them about the apple pies, and they're like, really? Really? So after her interview, she sent them an apple pie and they hired her. Some people would have thought twice about that. I thought it was a great idea. And here's a takeaway for you. Most of us have heard of SMART goals, but I wanted to give you this template, and I'm happy to share the slides with you. I can arrange that with Robert. So we know what SMART goals are. If you don't, now you do. They're specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, and they're relevant, and they're time-based. Now, sometimes you see this model and it says time-bound. I don't like the word bound, it's too limiting. They're time based because time can be moved around a little bit. My husband doesn't always like it when I say that, but anyway, so I think that comes within that sense of control. What do you have control over? You can set your goals and you can ask yourself some really good questions around those goals to really set the direction and set your own compass and not just follow some roadmap that somebody else set out for you or a direction that you've been thinking that you have to follow. It's from the inside out, right? And a closing thought. The greatest mistake you can make in life is to continually be afraid you're going to make one. Make progress. Perfection doesn't even exist. Progress, not perfection. So, if you have any further questions for me down the road, you want to link in with me and follow my work or ask further questions or be in touch in any way, I'm always happy to connect with people. Just send me a quick note with a LinkedIn invitation saying that you heard me speak here, and I'd love to talk with you. And I'm open to questions, answers, and anything else that any comments now. So Robert, take it away if there are questions.
All right, I just put Tammy's website and LinkedIn in the chat. I think the LinkedIn link is actually live, so hopefully I did that right. All right, so we have plenty of time for questions, which is great. All right, I am going to ask, I'm going to go to the chat first. Okay, I'm going to ask Catherine's question first. It's a two-part question. Part one, how do you convince the algorithms or AI of a potential employer to hire you for a job for which you are overqualified, maybe even very overqualified, but which you are willing to take?
Okay. So first of all, there's a couple of things here. You're not convincing any algorithms of anything. What you want to do, or what you want to try to do, is, well, there are a couple things. One is with regard to the algorithms, you want to make sure that you craft your resume to have enough of the right keywords that are in the job description. You may already know this. And there's a couple of really great tools out there and websites that you can use that have all kinds of great uh, job search and career advice as well. One of them is called Resume Worded, WORDED. And they have free resources and then they have a paid plan as well. The other one is called Teal, TEAL. They both have tools that you can use where you can put your resume in there and then put in the job description, and it will give you a report that will tell you how closely matched your resume is to the job description. So that's where the algorithm begins and ends. With regard to having that conversation with the employer about your willingness to work in a job where you might appear to be overqualified or you are overqualified, that's where you really need to do some outreach. And so the first thing that I always suggest that people do is to go to LinkedIn and look at your network and see if you have any connections of anybody who works there, first degree or second degree, people that you know who may possibly be connected to someone who works there. Now, I understand that sometimes we are connected, or a lot of times we're connected to people on LinkedIn who we don't really know directly or personally, but we've agreed to connect with them on LinkedIn. And I've seen this happen over and over again where you reach out to somebody or you find that you've got a connection at a company through LinkedIn and then you say, "Oh, I don't really know them. I can't reach out to them." And that's where you are starting to go down the path that I would say is limiting you. And I say this from my own experience because what I have done is I have reached out to people in my network on LinkedIn who I do not know directly, but are either a first degree connection or a first degree connection who I might know who happens to know or appears to know someone at a company where I'm trying to develop a connection. And I will send them a note. I'll send them a message through LinkedIn, or I'll find their email address and I'll introduce myself and I'll tell them exactly why I'm writing to them. I'm looking for a very brief favor and I'll offer to return the favor. But I'm looking usually on behalf of a client to find a connection inside a company so that my client can have the opportunity to learn a little bit more about what that person's experience has been working inside that company. So it's not about reaching out to someone inside the company that you don't know to say, "Can you help me convince them that I want the job?" It's more about doing that due diligence as early as possible. So if you find a company you're interested in, even before you find a job opening, but even once you find a job opening, start looking for individuals who you may have some type of connection to. Hopefully, a warmer connection than what I just described. That's always better. But even if there's someone on LinkedIn that you don't know at all, and yet you are connected to them on LinkedIn, that's what LinkedIn is for. That's partly what it's for. So I have reached out to people I don't know at all on LinkedIn who I am connected to, and I've said, please, would you help me out here? Now, sometimes they don't answer me, but no answer is it's disappointing, but it's also not personal. But then I've had very nice people who have said, I'd be happy to help. That's what we're here for. And I've had people who don't know me, don't know my client, and they've been willing to engage and make an introduction. They're not endorsing anyone. They're just saying, look, this is part of what LinkedIn is for. It's about people connecting with people. You're not saying, I recommend this person. I'm just asking if you'd be willing to spend a few minutes talking to somebody about your experience in the company. Then once you get that conversation and somebody has a chance to talk to you, or you have a chance to ask them a few questions about their experience in the company, the likelihood is very high they're going to ask you a little bit about you and what your interests are, what you're interested in the company. You have the opportunity to say, I'm really interested in this industry, or I'm interested in the work that your company is doing. Maybe you've read some recent news articles about the company and say, I just heard that, you've been developing this or that, and I'm really excited about that. I'd love to be a part of it. You want to talk about how you'd like to contribute rather than saying, well, I'm overqualified, but I'd really like to work there. So there's a lot of ways to make those connections, but the algorithm, you're never going to trick an algorithm in essence. You've got to make connections with people directly in order to be known and for people to see the value that you're going to offer.
And her second part to her question, and I know you kind of reject some of the language, but I'll say it anyway. If your professional field is dying, how do you convince the algorithms or the AI of potential employers to think outside the box and to consider you for an adjacent or alternative career? Too often, I hear recruiters say that they are looking for specialized jobs people have, I'm sorry, maybe there's a missing period. They are looking for specialized jobs. People have already done as interns or in the summer of the first or second year of a professional degree. Maybe they have not even graduated yet. But when I was at that level, no one had those types of opportunities.
Mhm.
So I just kind of butchered that. But again, how do you convince employers to consider you for adjacent or alternative careers when your current professional field is dying?
Well, if your current professional field is dying, then you need to present a profile of yourself in the way that you bring value in an adjacent way. So so I think part of, and if I'm not getting this right, do feel free to, reach out to me for a more detailed conversation about this. But um, I would say that, um, you know, you're not going to convince anybody of anything they've heard at all, the recruiters, people like that. So it's on you to present a profile that they're going to want to hear, but at the same time, you want to be able to share what value you offer that they're looking for. And they're telling you, it sounds like, what they're looking for. And if you have been in a field where they're bringing very, let's say, green people in who have very little experience, and they're not necessarily looking for a more experienced person in that way, and they're looking for a certain very particular skill set, then you may need to look for other employers too. So again, this is where open and curious, being curious about this is very important to see what is it that you can say about yourself and how you have value, your value is that you can offer value to them or other employers based on not just your specific experience, but but parallel experience to what they're doing. You need to make sure that you know exactly what they're doing, what their core values are as a company, so that you can reflect that. And a good way to really get that understanding of what they're looking for is to talk to people who work there rather than just looking at a job description or a company website. So it takes a lot of work to get this information. I'm not sugarcoating that. But at the same time, if there's something that you see that they're doing that you find really exciting, you want to express that excitement. And uh, but I also understand that it feels like there's a lot of brick walls out there. And I would say you gotta start looking around what's on the other side of those walls that you haven't had a chance to see yet that may be exciting to you. Because clearly it sounds like there's something there that interests you. So how can you match those interests with what their needs are? And I know that may not fully answer your question. I hear the frustration and I know that there's ways through this. And it also may be that the kinds of organizations that you're looking at need something different than what you're offering at this point. It may be that you need to look at different types of companies or organizations too. But I don't know the specifics, so I know I'm giving you kind of generic answers. So.
So we'll go to the next question. So, Rick, you asked a question about 25 minutes ago. I've kind of lost the context. If you want to re ask that question with a little more context, that would be good. Wayne says finding a plan C for cash that is not minimum wage can be very difficult. Elba says if we are out of the workplace, how do we connect appropriately with other people to network? How do we network? I know you can connect via LinkedIn, but that seems very different. And joining organizations costs money. Before you answer that one, though, let me read some responses that comment and question garnered. Lynn says, if there are organizations that you are interested in joining, look to see if they have a discounted rate for those that are unemployed or in transition. Some do, some don't. It is worth looking into. Janet says you should try to join a college alum group or event that is a great way to network, or even your town website. There's also some sort of events on there sometimes. Someone said, I pay and attend conferences and workshops to connect with people in the industry. Rick says to network every day. So yeah, so Tammy, what are your thoughts on really, how's the best, what's the best thing to do to network beyond LinkedIn?
Right. So, there's a lot of ways to network. First of all, people often narrow their networking to only people in their industry. And I'm going to go back to the C and the E here, curiosity. Stay wildly curious. This is going to be wildly curious. So, who's your next door neighbor? Who's your cousin who lives in another state? Um, Talk to everybody and anybody you know. And I don't mean that you have to be, telling everyone your life story, but let me give you a quick example. I had a client who was a very successful securities attorney, and and he had a lot of things going against him when he was looking for work. He had been in a senior level position. He was out of work. He had, very white hair. He looked very senior, presented well, but there were a lot of places that weren't looking for someone at a senior level like that. That's an expensive hire. And he happened to be talking to his brother. He lived up here in Boston. He happened to be talking to his brother one day who lives in New York City, who's in a whole different industry. And his brother said, actually, I know this guy I went to college with who works at Fidelity in Boston. Why don't I introduce you to him? So his brother introduced him to this old college alum friend of his in Boston at Fidelity. They got acquainted. Next thing you know, my client's getting a job at Fidelity. So think about people that you know who may know very little or don't know what you do exactly, or but they know people. Everyone you know knows other people. I always say, think about those people in your life who seem like they're the kind of person who knows everyone. People say I'm one of those people, actually. But you don't have to network only within your industry. Networking can be free. You don't have to join. You don't have to go to events that cost money. You can look, there still is such a thing as meetup groups too. Those usually don't cost a thing or they cost very little. Some of those are industry focused. You can meet up with people in all kinds of ways. I can tell you as an independent entrepreneur myself, I'm always looking for my next job. Okay. I've had people who will overhear me talking about something at a party and they'll come up to me and start talking to me about what I do. And next thing I know, they're making an appointment with me. I've had people overhearing me at a Starbucks and come up to me and talk to me. I'm not saying you start eavesdropping on people at Starbucks, but what I'm saying is that there are lots of very informal, casual opportunities to connect with people if you are staying present and open and curious. So, for example, if you take an exercise class somewhere, perhaps, there are people in those classes who you might have known for years already who happen to know someone else who works in a certain field or for a certain type of company. Um, and as I said, you could have a family member, cousin, old friend who lives in another state, but for all you know, they know somebody who lives and works back here or wherever you are. And location isn't even as much of a constraint as it used to be. So you have to think very, very openly and broadly about who your network is. Your network is everybody. It's not just people in your industry. And I would say that the kinds of comments that I heard from people is exactly the kind of thing that you really, when you start thinking that way, stop yourself, take a step back, and say, okay, who else do I know who, for all I know, they know all kinds of other people I never even dreamed they know. And talk to people that you just know for one reason or another. I mean, and then I've heard people say, oh, well, they're retired now. They're retired, but they're still connected to people. And they may still know people at their old company or even two companies ago. So just because somebody's no longer working or somebody works in a different field, they may have had an adjacent reason to be involved with your industry in some way or another. So again, stay very open and very curious. Don't let any of those things limit you.
Several people also suggesting volunteering as a networking opportunity. And
Perfect.
while it's not financially rewarding, it is emotionally rewarding and can fill a gap on a resume and bridge you to your next position. I think by answering that question, you've also answered Mary's question. A couple of people asking about the chat. I will send the chat when I send the recording out, so you'll have the ability to save the chat when I send you the email with the recording. The chat will be downloadable then. And yes, Margot, as Tammy said, she will also send me the slides today, so I'll pass those along. So you are getting the recording, the slides, and the chat. So what's better than that? I think so. A couple people were asking. You had referenced, I think, two resume websites or two resume resources.
Yeah.
Could you quickly repeat those?
Yes, it's called Resume Worded. So WORDED. And then the other one is called Teal, TEAL.
Okay.
And there
That's
are others, but those are the two that I recommend first.
all right. So I think that satisfies all the questions in the comments. And there's just one very long question in the Q&A. And then we'll probably wrap up. We're going a little over 10:30, but we started about 10 minutes late, so I think it'll all work out in the end. An anonymous attendee, stay with me here. Question comes at the end. I'm interested in exiting the education industry and really investing in co-ops. I invested in yoga therapy, but it didn't turn out the way I wanted because I can't wear multiple hats as a small business owner. I also know that I am no longer built for the typical 40 to 60-hour work week. This is my experience as a neurodivergent who has had multiple seasons of achieving, striving, and burnout. I would like to create or work with people in a work culture that fits my inner culture. I've done the typical networking. I am looking into building community and sustaining relationships. I was also thinking about joining co ops or internships or something alternative to the typical route of returning to school and owing more student debt. What would be a good first step when one knows what they don't want and are transitioning to what they do want?
Mm, that is a fantastic question and a very thorough description. Thank you for that. So there's a couple of things that occur to me. First of all, um, again, I would be looking into thinking about, you know, thinking about anything that you think you might want. I know you know what you don't want, and looking into, I would still consider some meetup groups. I would also consider doing some searches online. There probably are some other resources that might be specific to, not that I'm trying to segment people who are neurodivergent, because that in and of itself is a very broad range of people, but it might be useful if there are particular groups or um, support types of organizations that work with or help people who are trying to find their way to the right kinds of opportunities, given, given certain parameters, like not wanting to work a certain number of hours or wanting to be in the right environments that really can accommodate neurodivergent people. And I know that there are organizations out there that really help people identify those options. Um, and I don't have those off the top of my head, but I certainly could. Um, I have connections with people who probably could answer this in far more detail than what I can answer at the moment. And so if at all possible, if you'd like to reach out to me, I'm happy to offer you more resources, um, if that would be useful to you. But I don't have an exact answer at the moment. I know I've even looked into some of these things for other people, and I have one colleague in particular. Let me see if I can find. Okay. So I have a colleague whose name is Ludmila Praslova. She wrote a book called The Canary Code. Now, there may be lots of resources in her book, or she's written a lot of articles, and she would be somebody I would reach out um, to put your question in front of her. So she's in California, but that doesn't matter. And she would be she's at the top of the field when it comes to neurodivergent people really finding work situations that really suit them. And she does a lot of work with employers and with students. She's a professor and really trying to help people and really helping employers also develop a keener awareness of inclusiveness. So I hope that's a helpful answer. Again, the book is called The Canary Code, Ludmila, Ludmila Praslova, Praslova.
Excellent, Tammy. We're going to end on this antidote from Roger. I recently connected on LinkedIn with a person in my neighborhood who I see fairly regularly. We see each other as we walk our dogs. We started chatting, how are you doing, etc. I explained my situation. She is actually in an industry I was in and wants to get back into. You just never know who can help. So there you go. All right, Tammy, any last words for the audience before
Well,
we
it
wrap
just
things up?
just made me think one of the places where I know people network is at the dog park. So dog owners love to network. Not that I'm saying you have to go out and get a dog, but there's one of your informal gathering places that amazing things can happen. I love hearing that story. Thank you for that. I think the main thing I want to emphasize here is don't don't get caught in your own head with a bunch of rules that you think like I can only network or I have to join groups and pay a lot of money to join groups. Um, you're not alone. Make sure you're reaching out to all kinds of people. Everybody knows somebody else. And when I say stay open and curious about everything as broadly as you can and and show up, be present. Yeah, that I know this sounds a little bit generic, but this is how people step into their next opportunity. And I'm not trying to sell my podcast, but there's some great stories of people who did exactly that on the podcast, and that those are just good real life examples. And I think real life examples are very helpful.
So, folks, let's give Tammy a big virtual round of applause. Visit her website, connect with her on LinkedIn, listen to her podcast, read her book. I want to thank the Friends of the Library. You will be receiving an email from me later today with the recording, with the slides, and with the chat. Please take the anonymous feedback survey when you exit the Zoom. And finally, just a little tease. Next Wednesday, April 29th, 9:30, we will be back with Patricia Hunt Cynical, who is the CEO and founder of First Beacon Group, LLC, a Boston-based human resources consulting firm. Her talk is called Job Hunting Do's and Don'ts. And Patricia, you might know her name because she serves as one of the job doc columnists and bloggers for the Boston Globe and Boston.com. So Patricia will be with us next Wednesday at 9:30. So thank you all so much, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. Thanks again, Tammy.
Thank you.
Have a good one.